With the recent release of the film about serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, the number of people who are curious about his life and cases seems to be on the rise. Join us today as we take a look at how experts break down Jeffrey Dahmer's cases and try to explain his way of thinking in a two-part discussion. He is regarded as one of the most notorious serial killers in recent memory. Over the span of 13 years, necrophile and cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17 men and boys. The Dahmer case was taken a look at by a criminal psychologist who specialized in homicide, sex offenses, and psychopathology. And today we are going to have a sneak peek into his breakdown on this case. We can start with the early history of Jeffrey Dahmer. Lionel Dahmer and Joyce Annette Rocky Dahmer welcomed their son into the world on May 21, 1960. Dahmer experienced a lot of loneliness as a child. His parents often fought during marriage and both battled depression. Jeffrey had a challenging upbringing. There were issues between the husband and wife at home. The close-knit family he was expecting wasn't ever there. He felt alone since he lacked the attachment that most people develop as they grow up. Before we continue though, a brief request from us. If you find value in this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss our valuable content in psychology in the future. Now let's continue with our discussion all about Jeffrey Dahmer. One day, Jeffrey Dahmer returns home when he was 17 years old. His mother left their home and took with her their young son, David. Jeffrey claimed that this was one of those early events in his life that seriously traumatized him. The young Dahmer was very quiet and reclusive. He also showed an interest in dead animals, dissecting corpses and gathering and bleaching chicken bones. He said he was excited by the procedure. Any child who has experienced trauma is likely to experience this, and many serial killers undoubtedly had this feature. Animal abuse and arson are two behaviors that are brought on by childhood trauma and a lack of attachment. Children frequently set fire to things or hurt animals because they lack the ability to communicate their true feelings. And I know how it sounds, but this is in fact a cry for help. The part that we never discuss is the fire-starting imaginations. As Dahmer's sexuality continued to develop, his trauma and obsession with dead animals started to intersect. He developed an obsession with power and control. Around this time, he also discovered he was gay, which caused him to feel ashamed and perplexed. He was actually incredibly conflicted as well. His lack of attachment, conflict, and loneliness all served to kind of lay the foundation for where he would go. It was a very intriguing process because he didn't suddenly declare that he was a murderer one day. Rather, he developed that over the course of several years. As you recall, he had thoughts about killing a young man in this case, and fantasies eventually turned into action. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he wanted to be with someone who had been laid to rest. He therefore had a paraphilic sexual fantasy about having an unconscious partner. Paraphilia, according to Merriam-Webster, is a pattern of recurrently sexually aroused mental images or behavior including peculiar and particularly socially inappropriate sexual activities. There are now various types of paraphilia. There is paraphilia that isn't legal. Latex is a popular material. They become interested in plush toys and furries, and the list goes on. 1 in 10 American men engage in paraphilia in one form or another. In reality, 4 of those 10 males engage in criminal pedophilia. About half of individuals develop the more aggressive forms of criminal paraphilia, just to be exact. Dahmer started drinking regularly in high school to deal with his sinister ideas. He was known to pull practical jokes and stage seizures. He started thinking about what it would be like to have sex with a dead body when he was 16 years old. Jeffrey entertained numerous fantasies, some of which aren't even his. Eventually, fantasies also turned into action, and one day, his fantasies found a way to deeply root into his life. So it isn't true that one day someone would just wake up in the morning and become a necrophile. It is an ongoing transformational process that takes time. Some people who entertain these fantasies let them run amok in their minds and let them grow. All of us are sexual beings, that's true, but we must all learn to engage in sexual activity responsibly. However, there are some social groups that do not feel at ease with themselves. They find it difficult to converse with others. Jeffrey, for instance, didn't have the abilities to be intimate, which is why he felt more at ease with dead people. He was so full of self-doubt and insecurity about his own life that he gradually grew accustomed to those who could not or would not reject him. People who are dead. Sooner or later, Dahmer would play out one of his fantasies. 3 weeks after Stephen Hicks graduated from high school in June 1978, Dahmer picked him up off the street and took him back to his father's house. After a few drinks shared by the two, Hicks attempted to leave, but Dahmer beat him with a barbell. Before dismembering and discarding the body, Dahmer had sex with it first. Jeffrey felt a great sense of satisfaction when he killed Stephen Hicks. He thought to himself that finally he could put his fantasies into action. He was already prepared with his strategy. First, he had developed a fantasy plan. He understood that now was the ideal opportunity to seize him, entice him in, and kill him. He was finally able to interact with the body at the level of closeness that most of us usually take for granted in regular relationships, and he was able to become intimate with the body of Stephen Hicks. But this person is now deceased, and they won't turn him down. They won't make fun of him. They won't give him any excuse for anxiety. He is able to carry out his desires, and he got away with it. Dahmer later on enlisted in the military following high school, but was later released in 1981. Following that, Dahmer resided with his grandmother and worked night shifts at a nearby chocolate manufacturer. Dahmer would go almost 10 years without killing again. According to an interview with his mother, Dahmer would look up young guys who had died in automobile accidents or from illnesses. This helped him suppress his cravings for a long time. Dahmer would also attend the screenings. He would then attend the funerals. Finally, he would also travel to the cemetery to visit their graves. He would dig them up at night and have sex with the corpses. For him, the entire concept of being with someone who had been buried was really significant. He couldn't sate his cravings with grave robbing for very long, however. At one time, he even had a mannequin, but it wasn't the same. 16 additional men and boys would perish when Dahmer resumed his murderous rampage in 1987. In order to buy them a drink, he frequently picked them up at gay bars, bathhouses, and pornographic stores. He maintained a very low profile. He simply met people, and he was incredibly cordial. He would just casually invite people to his house, you know? He would then poison the beverage, which would render them comatose. That wasn't how it started out. The men visited his residence, they spent a few days with him, and Jeffrey would delay killing them until far later on. He realized that he had to kill them when they started wanting to leave because he couldn't bear the thought of them leaving him or rejecting him. The profiles of many of Dahmer's victims were similar. They were primarily physically fit men of race who, in Dahmer's words, had a Chippendale body type. He specifically chose males in locations where he believed they would not be missed. Additionally, it's possible that he selected men of color because he himself isn't a man of race. Also, he wouldn't be a suspect that way, because if these men of color were abducting women, they would be searching for another man of color who might be responsible, which he most certainly didn't fit the criteria for. Dahmer would choke his victims until they were asleep, at which point he would have sex with the corpse, but because Dahmer carried out these actions in his flat, he was able to pursue other sexual aspirations as well. He would cut holes in the torsos to utilize them for intercourse, sleep close to the corpses, and dismember their remains. He castrated and decapitated his prey, then removed the flesh from the bones and gathered the heads. Another macabre thing about Jeffrey Dahmer was that in order to make his victims into zombies, he bore holes into their heads. After all this, there would even be more gruesome acts. He also started eating the flesh of his victims, which marked a significant change in his conduct. And this we will be discussing in the second part of the video, so please stay tuned. That concludes part 1 of our video on the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. More about him in the next episode. And hey, leave us a like, subscribe, and click that bell button to receive information on our new videos. Anyway, see you later, and thank you for watching.